At 8:06 in the morning, the most feared mafia boss in the city handed his 7 months pregnant wife a black trash bag and told her to take only what she personally earned. Standing behind him was his young mistress, casually wearing the wife's own cardigan like she'd already moved in. 7 years of marriage, one trash bag. But before she walked out the door, Serena Ashcroft picked up one sealed envelope her late grandmother left behind, and the 8 words written on the front were about to burn everything down. Hit like, drop your city in the comments so I can see how far this story has traveled. And don't you dare close this, because this man just threw out the woman who secretly owns everything he has. The morning started the way bad mornings always do, quietly, without warning, wearing the face of something ordinary. Serena Ashcroft woke at 6:45 to the smell of espresso she hadn't made. She lay still for a moment in the California king bed, one hand resting on the hard curve of her stomach, listening. 7 months along and her body had turned against her in small, grinding ways. Her lower back ached from the mattress. Her ankles felt thick and slow. And the baby had developed a habit of pressing a heel hard against her right ribs sometime around 3 in the morning, as though already impatient with the world outside. The penthouse was 52 floors above the city. On clear mornings, you could see the lake from the bedroom window, flat and gray-green and enormous, stretching out past the edge of everything until it looked like the beginning of somewhere else. Serena had loved that view once. She'd stood at that window on their first night in this apartment, barefoot on the cold marble, and thought, this is what arrival feels like. She didn't go to the window that morning. Something in the air was wrong. Not loud wrong, quiet wrong. The kind of wrongness that sits in the back of your throat before you understand it. She pulled herself upright slowly, one hand braced on the nightstand, and that was when she heard the voice. It was coming from the living room. Female. Low, but not low enough. Serena sat on the edge of the bed and breathed. She knew that voice. She'd known it for 14 months, actually, the way you know a splinter you can't quite reach, by the specific quality of the pain it caused. Bianca Rossi. 26 years old, dark hair, wide eyes, the particular confidence of a woman who had never once been asked to wait. Serena had found out about Bianca the way wives usually find out, not through confession, not through confrontation, but through the specific behavioral shift of a husband who stopped being careful. A phone left face down, a business trip that produced no receipts, a Wednesday evening that couldn't be accounted for and wasn't. She had said nothing for 3 months. She would regret that later. Not the silence itself, the reasons behind it. She'd stayed quiet because of the pregnancy, because of the apartment, because Luca Moretti's name opened doors and closed threats, and because she had allowed herself, slowly and without noticing, to mistake proximity to power for power itself. That was the error she would spend the next year repaying. She stood up, steadied herself, and walked toward the living room in bare feet on cold marble. Bianca was standing at the kitchen island, wearing a pale gray cardigan with the sleeves pushed up to her elbows, holding a mug of espresso with both hands. Serena's cardigan, the one she'd bought in Milan 3 winters ago, the one with the small moth hole near the left cuff that she'd always meant to have repaired and never did. Bianca was wearing it like she'd had it for years, like it had always belonged to her. Luca was at the window, Serena's window, the one she'd loved, with his back to the room. He was already dressed. Dark suit, no tie. His shoulders were the same shoulders they'd always been, broad and deliberate, the shoulders of a man accustomed to occupying space without apology. He had a phone in his left hand, but he wasn't looking at it. He was looking out at the lake. Neither of them noticed her for a moment. Then Luca turned. His face did the thing it did when he was managing a situation. It went neutral. Not cold exactly, just clean, professional. The same face he wore in meetings with men who wanted things from him and weren't going to get them. "You're up," he said. "I am," Serena said. Her voice came out steadier than she expected. She was grateful for that, the way you're grateful for small mercies when larger ones have stopped arriving. Bianca didn't move, didn't put down the mug, just shifted her weight slightly and looked at Serena with an expression that hovered somewhere between sympathy and satisfaction. The look of a woman who had won something and was generous enough not to say so out loud. "We need to talk," Luca said. "Okay," Serena said. She didn't sit down. Standing felt important. Luca came away from the window. He stopped a few feet from her and put his phone in his jacket pocket, and then he looked at her. Really looked at her. And she watched him do the math she'd watched him do 100 times in business, the calculation of cost versus outcome, the measuring of resistance. "This isn't working," he said. "You know it's not working. It hasn't been working for a long time." Serena looked at her cardigan on Bianca's body. "Define a long time," she said. "Serena, must I? No, I'm asking. Define the timeline you're working with, because from where I'm standing, 7 years of marriage and 7 months of pregnancy seems like a fairly specific context for a long time." Luca's jaw tightened. "Don't do this." "Do what?" "Make it complicated." Something moved through her chest then. Something she couldn't name exactly. Somewhere between grief and fury, occupying the same space, pressing against each other like tectonic plates. She breathed through it. The baby shifted against her ribs. "It's already complicated, Luca." He reached somewhere. She didn't see where. She was still looking at Bianca. And when she turned back, he was holding a black trash bag, one of the heavy-duty ones from under the kitchen sink. He held it out toward her with one hand, the other in his pocket, casual, the way you'd offer someone a glass of water. "Take what's yours," he said, "what you personally earned. Everything else stays." Serena looked at the bag. She looked at it for what felt like a very long time, though it was probably 3 seconds. "That's a trash bag," she said. "It's practical. I've lived in this apartment for 4 years. And it'll all be here when the legal process is done," he said. "But right now, today, I need you to go. I have a lawyer who can explain the separation agreement. There's a temporary injunction." "There's no injunction." "Serena, show me the paperwork." Luca's eyes went flat. "Don't push this. Show me the actual paperwork with an actual judge's signature, or don't wave a legal term at me like I'm supposed to flinch." Her voice was still steady. She genuinely could not explain where the steadiness was coming from. Some part of her that had been waiting for this, maybe. Some part that had been quietly preparing without telling the rest of her. "I went to school, Luca. I know what an injunction looks like, and I know it requires a court order. And I know you don't have one because you decided to do this at 8 in the morning on a Tuesday without any notice because you thought I'd just go." Bianca set down the espresso mug. The small sound of ceramic on marble was loud in the silence. "Maybe," Bianca said quietly, "this would be easier if—" "Don't." Serena turned to look at her fully for the first time. "Don't speak. This isn't your conversation." Bianca held her gaze for a moment, then looked away. A small victory. Serena catalogued it and moved on. Luca stepped forward. Not threatening. He wasn't a man who needed to be physically threatening. He had people for that, infrastructure for that, but close enough that she had to look up at him, which she suspected was intentional. "The building is in my name," he said. "The accounts are in my name. The cars are in my name. You want to fight this in court? That's your right, but you'll be doing it from somewhere else, because this address, this apartment, is mine, and I need you to leave it today." Serena didn't look away from him. She was measuring something. Not him. She'd already measured him, had finished that accounting sometime in the past 3 months and arrived at a number she didn't like. She was measuring herself, measuring what she was about to do and whether she could carry the weight of it. "Fine," she said. Luca blinked. He'd expected more resistance. She could see it in the slight recalibration of his expression, the almost imperceptible reset of his posture. "Fine," he said. "I'll take what's mine." She reached out and took the trash bag from his hand. The plastic was cold. She held it at her side. "And I'll go." She turned and walked back toward the bedroom. Her hands were shaking now. Finally, they'd held out admirably, and now they were done holding out. And she pressed them together as she walked, the bag crumpling between her fingers, trying to keep the trembling from moving up her arms into her shoulders. She stood in the bedroom doorway for a moment and looked at the room. 4 years. 4 years of sleeping in this room, of waking up to the lake, of lying awake at 3 in the morning, listening to a man breathe beside her, and wondering when it had started going wrong and which moment she could have grabbed onto if she'd only been paying better attention. 4 years of hanging her clothes in that closet, of keeping her books on that nightstand, of sitting at that small vanity table with the good light and doing her makeup and looking at herself and trying to figure out who exactly she was becoming. She walked to the closet. She was practical about it. Deliberately, clinically practical. She took 3 changes of clothes, the ones she'd bought herself before the marriage with money she'd earned at the architectural firm where she'd worked for 2 years before Luca had convinced her, gently, lovingly, with impeccable logic, that his life required a full partner, not a part-time wife. She took her personal documents from the fireproof box on the top shelf. Her passport, her birth certificate, her university degrees, a folder of bank records from her own account. The small one Luca didn't know about because she'd opened it 4 years ago on a Tuesday afternoon when some quiet alarm had gone off in her chest that she hadn't yet understood. She took her laptop. She took the small silver watch her mother had given her at graduation. And then she saw the envelope. It was sitting on the nightstand on her side of the bed, which was strange because she didn't remember putting it there. And then she remembered. She'd brought it up from the storage unit 3 weeks ago when she'd been reorganizing, found it in a box of her grandmother's things, and meant to open it and kept not opening it. She'd placed it on the nightstand intending to read it that night. And then she'd been tired. And then the next night she'd been tired again, and it had just sat there. Her grandmother's handwriting on the front. Small, precise letters. The handwriting of a woman who had been meticulous about everything. 8 words. Open this when they make you feel homeless. Serena stood very still. The shaking in her hands stopped. Not because she calmed down. She didn't calm down. But because something else moved in to occupy the space where the shaking had been. Something that felt, unexpectedly, like the structural sensation of a foundation. Something solid beneath the floor she was standing on. She picked up the envelope and put it in the trash bag. Then she walked out of the bedroom, through the living room where Luca was on his phone now, and Bianca had moved to the couch, one leg folded under her, scrolling through something on her own phone as though this were any ordinary morning. And Serena walked past both of them without a word and pressed the elevator button and waited. Luca looked up from his phone. "The building management will want a forwarding address," he said, "for mail." Serena looked at him. "I'll handle my own mail," she said. The elevator doors opened. She stepped inside. She faced forward. She watched the doors close on the living room, on Bianca's borrowed cardigan, on the window with the lake view she had loved, on the face of the man who had decided she was worth a trash bag. The elevator descended. 52 floors. Serena stood in the center of the elevator car, one hand on her stomach, one hand holding the crumpled black bag, and she counted her breaths the way her doctor had told her to when the anxiety got bad. In through the nose, 4 counts, hold 2, out through the mouth, 6. In through the nose, hold, out. She made it to the lobby. The doorman, Marcus, who had worked the morning shift for 3 years, who knew her coffee order, who had once helped her carry groceries when her back had been bad in her 2nd month, looked up from the desk and then quickly looked away. He knew. Of course he knew. In buildings like this, everybody knew. Serena walked to the seating area by the window facing the street. 2 low chairs and a small table, the kind of furniture designed to suggest you were welcome without encouraging you to stay. And she sat down. She sat there for a moment with the trash bag at her feet and the city going about its Tuesday outside the glass. People in coats walking fast with coffee cups. A delivery truck double parked. A woman in yellow hurrying across an intersection against the light. Then she took the envelope out of the bag. She broke the seal. Her grandmother had used 2 layers of tape, the careful, thorough redundancy of a woman who wanted things to stay closed until it was the right time for them to open. Inside was a single folded sheet of paper and a smaller sealed envelope marked with a law firm name, Hale and Associates, with an address in the financial district. The letter was dated 9 years ago. Her grandmother's handwriting, same precise small letters. "My darling Serena, if you're reading this, then something in your life has cracked open enough to make you reach for this envelope. I'm glad you reached. I've been waiting for you to need what's inside. There are things about our family I never told you while I was living, not because I doubted you, but because I wanted you to find your own way into your strength before you learn the full weight of what you carry. A woman who discovers her power too early sometimes forgets to discover herself first. The envelope from Hale and Associates contains a document that will direct you to the full accounting of the Ashcroft Legacy Trust. I have spent 30 years building it quietly, carefully, and entirely in your name. Real estate, holdings, properties throughout the city. The numbers will surprise you. Don't let them frighten you. You are not what anyone has made of you. You are what I saw in you the first day you asked me why something was unfair and waited for a real answer instead of a comforting one. Go see Veronica Hale. She's been waiting. With all my love, Grant Serena read it twice. Then she looked out the window at the street. A man in a suit walked past without looking at her. A pigeon landed on the outside ledge and then took off again. The delivery truck pulled away from the curb. The city continued being the city, indifferent and enormous, doing what cities do. Serena opened the inner envelope. The document inside was dense, legal formatting, references and cross-references, terms she understood partially, and terms she would need explained. But there were numbers in it, and those numbers were not ambiguous, and she sat with them for a long time. Then she put everything back in the outer envelope, very carefully, folding the letter with the same precision her grandmother had used, and she sat with her hands in her lap and her stomach pressed forward, and her future arranged itself in front of her in a shape she had not previously imagined. She pulled out her phone and called the number from the Hale & Associates envelope. It rang twice. Hale & Associates, good morning. My name is Serena Ashcroft, she said. I'd like to speak with Veronica Hale. A brief pause. May I ask what this concerns? The Ashcroft Legacy Trust, Serena said. I'm the heir. I'd like to come in today. Another pause, longer this time. When the voice came back, it was different, more careful, more precisely calibrated. Ms. Ashcroft, Ms. Hale has been expecting your call. How soon can you come in? Serena looked up at the ceiling of the lobby, at the crystal fixture above her, the architectural details she'd once admired without knowing who had paid for it, without knowing who owned the building it hung in. Give me an hour, she said. She ended the call. Marcus was watching her from the desk. When she looked at him, he looked away again, then looked back, then seemed to make a decision. He crossed the lobby to her. Mrs. Moretti, he said, and then corrected himself. Ms. Ashcroft, do you need a car? She thought about this. Yes, she said. Not from the building account. I'll pay for it separately. I'll call you a car, he said. On me. She looked at him. His face was doing something careful and kind, the face of a man who had watched something happen that he couldn't intervene in and was finding the small adjacent way to matter. Thank you, Marcus, she said. He nodded and went back to the desk. Serena sat with the envelope in her hands and the trash bag at her feet, and the baby pressing steadily against her ribs, and thought about her grandmother, about a small woman in a large kitchen who had always answered questions with real answers, who had smelled like lavender hand cream and strong coffee, who had looked at Serena when she was 9 years old and crying over some injustice and said, "The feeling you're having right now, keep it. Don't smooth it over. That feeling is going to be useful someday. Keep it." She had kept it. 45 minutes later, Serena Ashcroft walked into the offices of Hale & Associates on the 31st floor of a building in the financial district, carrying a trash bag and a sealed envelope and 7 months of pregnancy and the specific, dangerous kind of calm that comes not from the absence of feeling, but from the arrival of absolute clarity. Veronica Hale was 61 years old, which she wore the way certain women wear good coats. Not to be warm, but to be formidable. She had silver hair cut close, dark eyes behind steel-framed glasses, and the particular stillness of someone who had spent decades in rooms where everything depended on saying the right thing at the right time, and had learned to treat silence as a resource rather than a void. She came around from behind her desk when Serena was shown in. She didn't extend a hand immediately. She looked at Serena, at all of her, the trash bag, the pregnancy, the set of the jaw, the eyes, and what moved across her face was recognition, not surprise. "Sit down," she said, not unkindly, with the tone of someone who understood that the standing had already been done and the sitting was now appropriate. Serena sat. Veronica sat across from her, not behind the desk, in one of the client chairs, and folded her hands in her lap. "Your grandmother told me this day would come," Veronica said. "She described it to me in some detail, actually. She said you'd probably be wearing something you hadn't chosen for yourself." She glanced at the trash bag. I assumed she meant metaphorically. She was often metaphorical. She wasn't, Serena said. This time, literally a trash bag. Veronica's mouth moved in something that was almost a smile and then was a different expression, harder, more purposeful. "Tell me what happened this morning," she said. "Everything in order," Serena told her. She was precise. She'd always been precise. It was one of the things Luca had found attractive about her early and found inconvenient about her later. The way she didn't round numbers or soften descriptions. The way she reported things as they were rather than as she felt about them. She gave Veronica the timeline, the trash bag, the injunction bluff, Bianca in the cardigan, the elevator, the lobby, the letter. When she finished, Veronica was quiet for a moment. "He bluffed about the injunction," Serena said. "He had nothing. He was counting on me not knowing that." "He's been counting on you not knowing quite a few things," Veronica said. She stood and went to her desk and came back with a thick-bound document and set it on the coffee table between them. "The Ashcroft Legacy Trust. Your grandmother established it in its current form 23 years ago. You were named sole heir and controlling trustee contingent on reaching the age of 30, which you did 2 years ago." "I'm 32, Serena said. "Yes. For 2 years you have been legally and completely the controlling trustee of this trust. You simply didn't know it yet." Veronica tapped the document. "Your grandmother was specific about the timing. She didn't want the trust activated until you needed it. She was afraid that too much too early would," her exact words were, "give you the answer before you'd learned the question." Serena looked at the document. "What's in the trust?" she said. Veronica told her. It took 11 minutes, which was how long it took to go through the inventory at a speed that allowed comprehension rather than just listing. By the end of the 11 minutes, Serena had heard the addresses and estimated valuations of 47 properties in the city, including 3 office towers, 11 luxury residential buildings, a portfolio of commercial and retail properties, 4 hotels, 8 event venues, and several dozen additional assets including investment holdings and a private endowment, including, Veronica noted near the end, the residential tower at 1100 Meridian Avenue, floors 1 through 50, including penthouse floor 52. Serena said nothing for a moment. "That's where I live," she said. "That's where you lived this morning," Veronica said. "Yes. Luca told me the building is in his name." "Luca Moretti's operating company holds a lease on the penthouse unit," Veronica said. "He does not own the building. No one who told him otherwise was telling him the truth, or he never checked, which seems—" She paused. "On reflection, consistent with what you've told me about him." Serena pressed her fingers against her mouth for a moment. "The office tower he runs his legitimate businesses from," she said slowly. Is there any chance—" 540 West Commercial, Veronica said. "Yes, Ashcroft Trust property." The room was very quiet. "His mother has boutiques," Serena said. 3 locations. She's been expanding. She just opened one on Ashford Row. All Ashford Row retail is trust property, Veronica said. The boutiques operate on renewable annual leases. "The Empire Builder Gala," Serena said. "He's receiving an award next month. He mentioned the venue." "The Meridian Grand Ballroom," Veronica said. "Ground floor of the building you woke up in this morning." Serena looked at her hands. She turned them over in her lap, her palms. She thought about all the things these hands had done in this city. The dinners she'd cooked in that penthouse kitchen, the events she'd organized for Luca's business relationships, the careful navigation of his world with its unspoken rules and its invisible hierarchies, and its absolute requirement that she be present without being noticed, supportive without being recognized, adjacent to power without possessing any. She thought about the years she'd spent being the right kind of quiet. "I want to understand something," she said, "before we talk about next steps. My grandmother, she built all of this deliberately. She kept it from me deliberately. She knew I'd married Luca. She came to the wedding. She knew what his world was." "She knew," Veronica confirmed, "and she let me stay in that marriage without—" "She made a choice," Veronica said carefully. "I disagreed with it, for the record. I told her more than once that you should know. Your grandmother was one of the most brilliant and stubborn people I have ever had the privilege of knowing, and she had a theory about strength that I found compelling, even when I found it difficult." "What was the theory?" Veronica looked at her for a moment. "That a woman who escapes because she has resources is grateful," she said, "and a woman who survives because she discovers her own capacity First, before the resources, is unbreakable. Serena absorbed this. She wanted me to choose to leave before she gave me a reason, Serena said. She wanted you to know the difference between leaving because you had to and leaving because you decided to, Veronica said. I think she underestimated how long it would take. I think she would be sorry about that, if she could tell you. Serena looked out the window. The city from the 31st floor looked different than from the 52nd. Lower, more at eye level, more like something you were inside rather than looking down at. She preferred it, she realized. She'd always been more comfortable at eye level. Okay, she said. She turned back to Veronica. Tell me what we can do, and in what order, and how long each piece takes. Veronica Hale opened the bound document to the first tabbed section, and something in her posture shifted. Forward, precise, engaged, the posture of a woman settling into the thing she does best. The trust's immediate legal standing is unambiguous, she said. Your identity as trustee can be documented and registered within 48 hours. Thereafter, all lease and tenancy matters fall under your authority as controlling trustee. The Moretti Operating Company's penthouse lease contains a standard termination clause, 30 days notice with verified cause, or 60 days without cause. What counts as cause? Serena asked. Unauthorized subletting, unauthorized occupants not named in the lease agreement. Veronica's voice was level. If, for example, there is currently an individual residing in the penthouse unit who is not named in the Moretti Operating Company's lease agreement. There is, Serena said. Then we have cause. Serena nodded slowly. I want to be clear about something, she said. I'm not doing this out of anger. Veronica looked at her. I'm saying that because I want to make sure we do this correctly, Serena continued. Completely. Thoroughly. Every step legal, documented, unimpeachable. I don't want this to be a revenge story. I want it to be a property story, a business story. I want every single thing that happens next to be boring and legal and utterly undeniable. Veronica was quiet for a moment. That, she said, is exactly what your grandmother said you'd say. She said those exact words? She said, when she comes in, she'll want to do it right. Don't let anyone talk her out of that. It's the most dangerous version of her. The most dangerous version. Serena sat with that for a moment. Let it settle. Then she picked up the bound document from the coffee table and held it in both hands. Heavy, dense, the physical weight of decades of invisible work. And she thought about her grandmother, about that small woman and her lavender hand cream and her real answers, about 30 years of building something in silence and putting it in an envelope and waiting. She thought about the trash bag. She thought about the cardigan. She thought about Luca's face when he'd held out the bag, that professionally neutral face, the cost-benefit calculation, the absolute certainty that she would take the bag and go quietly. She thought about Bianca scrolling her phone on the couch, already settled in, already at home. Let's get started, Serena said. Outside the 31st floor window, the city went about its business, enormous and indifferent. 47 properties, 3 office towers, 4 hotels, the ballroom, the boutiques, the penthouse where Bianca Rossi was, at this exact moment, probably finishing that espresso and taking photographs of herself in Serena's kitchen for whatever social media account she used to perform her life. Serena opened the first tabbed section of the trust document, the baby pressed against her ribs. She pressed back gently, the small private gesture of a woman making a silent agreement with the person growing inside her. I'm handling it. And in the building's records office, 3 floors below them, a document request had already been initiated, the first formal step in a chain of legal events that would, in the coming weeks, touch every property, every lease, every address that Luca Moretti believed he controlled. He had handed her a trash bag and told her to take only what she'd personally earned. He should have been more careful about what she considered personal. He should have been more careful about a great many things. But most of all, and this was the part he would not understand until it was far too late to matter, he should have been more careful about the name on the door. Not his name, hers. It had always been hers. 3 days after Serena Ashcroft walked out of the Meridian Tower lobby with a trash bag and an envelope, Luca Moretti threw a dinner party. This was not accidental. Luca did not do accidental things. The dinner party was deliberate, curated, and sent as a message the way men like him always sent messages. Through the performance of normalcy, through the demonstration that nothing had changed, that he remained exactly who he had always been, that the reorganization of his private life had been as smooth and controlled as everything else he touched. He invited 11 people, business partners, 2 city council members whose campaigns he had contributed to, the editor of a lifestyle magazine that had featured him twice, and Bianca's older sister, which was either a gesture of welcome or a warning shot depending on how you read it. He had the penthouse catered, same company he'd always used, the one with the Michelin-trained chef who knew how Luca liked his lamb, same florist, same wine allocation. The table was set for 12. The view over the city was the view it always was, and Bianca sat at the far end of the table in a green dress that cost more than most people's monthly rent, and laughed at the right moments, and touched Luca's arm when she made a point, and the whole evening proceeded with the surface tension of something that had been engineered rather than lived. Serena knew about the dinner party because Bianca posted photographs of it. This was the thing about Bianca Rossi. She was very good-looking and very confident and genuinely clever in certain specific ways, but she had grown up in an era that had taught her that existence required documentation, and she documented everything. The table setting, the view, her own reflection in the window with the city lights behind her, a candid shot of Luca laughing at something, the composition just slightly too considered to be accidental. The caption on the last one read, "Some nights just feel like home." The post got 4,000 likes by midnight. Serena saw it at 11:15 from the bedroom of the furnished apartment Veronica's office had arranged for her in the financial district, a clean, spare one-bedroom on the 18th floor of a building that, as it happened, was also an Ashcroft Trust property, a fact that had produced a very specific expression on Veronica's face when she'd mentioned it, and that Serena had filed away without comment. She looked at the photograph for a long time. The view in the background was her view. The table in the midground was her table. The candles casting that particular warm light were the same candles she'd bought at the shop on Mercer Street because Luca liked the way they didn't drip. She put her phone face down on the nightstand. Then she picked it up again and screenshot the post. Not out of emotion, out of the cold organizational instinct that had been running quietly under everything since the morning in Veronica's office, when the shape of what she was doing had become clear to her. Every public post, every tag, every time stamp. Bianca was, without understanding it, building a documentary record of unauthorized occupancy of a trust property, and Serena was going to let her keep building it for exactly as long as was useful. She set a phone alarm for 6 a.m. and went to sleep. She slept better than she had in months. Across the city, in the penthouse that would not be the penthouse much longer, the dinner party was winding down. The last guest left at 11:40. The catering staff packed out. Bianca kicked off her heels at the kitchen island and poured herself the last of the Barolo and stood at the window looking at the city the way Serena used to stand at that window looking at the city. "She's going to do something," Bianca said. Luca was loosening his tie. He didn't look up. "No, she won't." "You don't know that." "I know Serena." He pulled the tie free and dropped it over the back of a chair. "She'll hire a lawyer, the lawyer will negotiate a settlement, we'll sort out custody arrangements, and in 3 months this will be a paperwork process. She's not—" He paused, reaching for the word. "She's not built for war." Bianca turned from the window. "Every woman is built for war when you've given her enough reason." Luca looked at her then. Something moved in his face, not worry exactly, the closest his face ever got to worry, which was a very faint tightening around the eyes, a micro-expression he'd have denied if confronted about it. "You don't need to manage this," he said. "I am managing this. I'm just saying, but—" "Bianca." His voice didn't raise. It didn't need to. "I'm managing it." She picked up her wine glass and said nothing else. But she left the lights on in the master bedroom that night, which was something Serena had never done. And sometime around 2 in the morning, she took her phone into the bathroom and sent a message to her sister that said only, "I don't know. Something feels off." Her sister didn't respond until morning. By then, quite a few things had already started moving. What? Veronica filed the trustee registration documentation on Wednesday morning. It was processed by Thursday afternoon, faster than standard, because the Ashcroft name was not unfamiliar to the relevant offices. And because Veronica Hale had been practicing law in this city for 34 years and understood exactly which windows to knock on and in what sequence. By Thursday evening, Serena Ashcroft was the documented, registered, legally unambiguous controlling trustee of the Ashcroft Legacy Trust. She sat in Veronica's conference room and signed her name at the bottom of the registration confirmation, and the pen left a mark on the page that was also, in some way she wasn't going to examine too closely in that moment, a mark on the shape of everything going forward. First notification goes out tomorrow, Veronica said. Standard trustee introduction letter to all property managers and leaseholders. It identifies you as the new active trustee and instructs that all future correspondence be directed to this office. Will Luca see it immediately? He'll see it whenever his property manager forwards it, which could be immediately or could take a few days depending on how attentive they are. Veronica removed her glasses and cleaned them with a small cloth from her desk drawer. The Moretti Operating Company's office building manager is generally prompt. I would expect he has it by end of day Monday. Serena nodded. The penthouse, she said. The penthouse unit notification goes directly to the leaseholder, the Moretti Operating Company, and simultaneously to the building management office. Veronica put her glasses back on. Given the documentation we've compiled about the unauthorized occupant, the letter will include a formal notice of lease review. Not termination yet. Not yet. Review. We give them the opportunity to respond. Due process is our friend here, Serena. Every step correct. Every step documented. We want there to be no argument about how we did this. Right. Serena pressed her palms flat on the table. The fluorescent light in the conference room was slightly blue-white, the kind of light that made everyone look like they were underwater. Veronica, when he gets the letter, what does he do? Veronica looked at her steadily. In my experience, men who've spent their lives being the person who sends the letters have a specific reaction when they start receiving them. Which is? They make calls. They try to locate the leverage they assume they have, she paused. And then they discover they don't have it, and they come to a meeting. Will he come to a meeting? He'll try to avoid one first. He'll try to handle it through intermediaries. His lawyer, possibly a business associate he thinks has influence over the situation. He'll want to make this quiet and contained. Veronica's voice was measured, analytical, the voice of someone describing weather patterns. When that doesn't work, yes, he'll come to a meeting. Serena thought about Luca's face, the professional neutrality, the cost-benefit calculation. He's going to be furious, she said. Almost certainly, Veronica agreed. The question is whether he expresses it productively or destructively, and whether we're prepared for either. Are we? Veronica allowed herself one of those almost smiles. We have been prepared for this for 23 years, Serena. A few days head start for him doesn't worry me. No. The first call Luca made on Monday morning, 40 minutes after his property manager forwarded the trustee notification letter, was to his own lawyer, a man named Curtis Greer, who billed at $900 an hour, and whose primary professional value was the ability to remain calm in the presence of very agitated, wealthy men. Tell me this is wrong, Luca said. I can't tell you that, Curtis said. Tell me there's a challenge. There might be grounds to examine the trust formation documents. The timeline, the manner of your wife's notification, My wife's grandmother built this trust over 30 years, Luca said. I need you to tell me the trust is challengeable. Curtis was quiet for a moment. Luca, if the trust documentation is clean, and trusts of this age and specificity usually are, the challenge will be expensive, time-consuming, and unlikely to succeed. The more productive question is what you want to accomplish, because if you want the penthouse, I want to know how I didn't know, Luca said. A different kind of quiet. That's not a legal question, Curtis said carefully. No, Luca said. It's not. He ended the call and stood at the window of his office, the office in the tower at 540 West Commercial, which the letter had also identified as Ashcroft Trust property, a detail that had produced a sensation he was not going to name because naming it would mean acknowledging it, and looked at the city and did the math that he'd been avoiding since the letter arrived. Every address. He'd built his operation across the city over 15 years, the legitimate layer, the businesses, the properties, the event venues, the retail partnerships, had been his foundation, the clean face of a structure that had other, less photographable components. He'd been meticulous. He'd checked ownership records on key acquisitions. He'd had lawyers verify leases before signing them. Except the buildings he'd moved into had been referred to him in several cases by a commercial real estate broker named Gerald Foss, who had been recommended by, Luca thought further back than was comfortable, by his own father-in-law, who was the husband of Margaret Ashcroft, who was Serena's grandmother. He put his hand flat on the window glass. Cold. The glass was always cold this high up. He had moved into buildings referred to him by his wife's grandmother. He had signed leases in buildings that his wife's grandmother owned. For 15 years, the woman had been his landlord, and he hadn't known. He took his hand off the glass. He turned away from the window. His chest felt tight in a way that had nothing to do with his heart, and everything to do with the specific physical sensation of being outmaneuvered in a way he was only now understanding. He called Bianca. "Did you know?" he said when she answered. "Know what?" "About her family's properties. About the trust." "Luca, I've known Serena for 14 months, mostly at a distance. I didn't know anything about—" "Not you. Anyone. Did anyone ever mention the Ashcroft family holdings to you?" "No." A pause. "Should they have?" He didn't answer that. "Luca," Bianca's voice shifted. "How bad is it?" "It's manageable," he said, which was what he said when things were bad. A silence. "What does that mean?" she said. "It means I need to make some calls. I need you to stay off social media today." "What? Why?" "Because I'm asking you to." Another silence, longer. "You're scaring me." "I'm not trying to scare you." He was moving now, back to his desk, opening his laptop, pulling up the property records he should have pulled up 16 years ago before he'd ever signed anything. "I'm trying to get in front of something." "In front of what?" "Bianca." His voice went flat. "Stay off social media. Today." She didn't answer. He looked at the screen and started reading, and the reading confirmed what the letter had suggested, and the confirmation produced a sensation he hadn't experienced since he was 23 years old and had made a serious error and understood all at once the full scope of what the error would cost him. He hadn't felt it since. He had been very careful for a very long time not to feel it again. Serena had been in this city for 7 years. He'd known her for 8. He had spent 8 years being careful about everything except her. Bianca posted 3 times that day. A morning coffee photograph, a midday view from the penthouse terrace, a short video of the city at dusk from the same terrace, her voice narrating something light and inconsequential about autumn light, her face tilted up into the wind. Each post was time-stamped. Each post was geotagged. Each post placed her, with legal specificity, inside a property that Serena's trust had just formally identified as subject to lease review. Serena's phone collected them. She was eating lunch at a small cafe near Veronica's office, soup because her back hurt and cold food wasn't appealing, when the third post came through, and she looked at it and thought, Veronica was right about due process, but due process doesn't require patience with deliberate provocation. She called Veronica. "She's still posting," she said. "I see it," Veronica said. "I have someone monitoring." "Every post is dated and geotagged from the penthouse." "Yes? That's not accidental." "Probably not," Veronica said. "She may have been advised to establish presence, or she may simply not understand what she's doing." A brief pause. "It doesn't matter which. The effect is the same." "What's the next step?" "The lease review notice was delivered this morning. The Moretti Operating Company has 7 business days to respond." Veronica's voice was steady as pavement. "If the response attempts to legitimize the current occupant's presence, we move to formal lease review proceedings. If there's no response, we treat silence as non-compliance." "And Bianca? If she continues to document herself residing in the property during active lease review, that documentation becomes part of the case file." A pause that felt almost like satisfaction. "She's doing our work for us, Serena." Serena looked out the cafe window. A woman pushed a stroller past. A man argued with his phone. The city ran its ordinary Tuesday operations. "Veronica," she said, I want to move faster." "We're moving at the correct speed." "I know. I'm not asking to cut corners. I'm asking—" She stopped, reformulated. "Is there anything that can be accelerated without compromising the process?" Veronica was quiet for a moment. "There is one thing," she said. "The Empire Builder Gala. It's 6 weeks out. The venue contract is a trust property. And the venue contract is in the name of the award organization, not Moretti personally. But the award committee has a formal notification process when venue ownership changes hands. Serena put down her spoon. They'd have to be notified, she said slowly. As a courtesy, standard procedure. And when they're notified, the committee then makes their own determination about whether the context of the award presentation has materially changed in any way that affects their process. Veronica's voice was measured, precise, containing nothing she hadn't chosen to put there. That determination is entirely theirs, not ours. Serena sat very still. The cafe made its small cafe sounds around her. The machine, the murmur of other conversations, the door opening and closing, the regular, ordinary texture of an afternoon. Send the notification, she said. Standard procedure, Veronica confirmed. I'll have it drafted by this afternoon. Serena ended the call. She picked up her spoon and finished her soup and paid her bill and walked back toward Veronica's office through the autumn city, past the buildings with their addresses, past the towers she now understood differently than she had 3 days ago, past the streets that looked the same and were the same and would keep being the same regardless of what was happening in the legal architecture beneath them. Her phone buzzed. A text from a number she didn't recognize. We need to talk. L. She stared at it for half a block. Then she kept walking and typed back, have your attorney contact Veronica Hale's office to arrange a meeting. 3 seconds. That's not how we do things, Serena. She stopped on the sidewalk. People moved around her, the city's persistent, indifferent flow. She typed, it is now. She put the phone in her pocket and kept walking. Her back ached. The baby pressed against her ribs. 6 weeks until the gala. 7 business days on the lease review. 47 properties and a grandmother who had spent 30 years preparing for a Tuesday morning that the grandmother herself hadn't lived to see. The most dangerous version of her. She turned the corner onto Financial and went up to the 31st floor and sat back down across from Veronica Hale and opened the trust document to the section she hadn't finished reading on Thursday, and she read it. And on Friday morning, when Luca Moretti's lawyer called Veronica's office to request an informal conversation about the trust notification, Veronica's assistant told him that Ms. Hale would be available for a formal meeting on Tuesday and that all agenda items should be submitted in writing by end of day Monday. The lawyer called back twice more that day. Veronica did not take either call. And that Sunday evening, Bianca Rossi went live on Instagram from the penthouse terrace. 7 minutes of Kanashiet. 3,000 viewers at peak. The city lit up behind her while she talked about the view and her life and something vague about new beginnings, and she was midway through a sentence about how some spaces just hold the right energy when her phone lit up with a notification that stopped her mid-word. And the 7-second pause before she recovered was clipped and saved by 14 different accounts and uploaded to 3 different platforms before midnight. It was a notification from her brand management representative. One of her major sponsors, a luxury skincare company whose contract represented 30% of her annual income, had sent a preliminary inquiry about a morality clause in her existing contract, specifically around association with properties under active legal dispute. Someone had sent them the lease review documents. Someone had sent them Bianca's own geotagged posts as supporting evidence. The live stream ended 12 minutes early. Bianca called Luca immediately after. He didn't answer the first time. Or the second. When he answered the third call, his voice was the voice it became when he was past the point of performance, flat and stripped and carrying the specific weight of a man who had run the numbers and arrived at a total he didn't like. I need you to come home, Bianca said. Her voice had lost its usual register. It sounded younger, uncertain. Luca, I need you to come home right now. I'm in a meeting. You're always in a meeting. I just got a message from my brand rep about a morality clause, and I have no idea what that means, but it doesn't sound... It means Serena's moving faster than I expected, he said. A silence. What do we do? Bianca said. And for the first time in 15 years of operating in a city where he had always known what to do, Luca Moretti did not have an answer ready. The silence stretched. In Veronica Hale's office on the 31st floor, the notification confirmations had come in through the afternoon. The award committee, the sponsor contact, the building management correspondence. Each one a tile in a mosaic that was becoming, slowly and legally and with absolute documentation, a picture that could not be argued with. And in the furnished apartment on the 18th floor of a building whose lobby she now knew was hers, Serena Ashcroft sat at the small dining table with the trust document and a yellow legal pad and a glass of water and wrote down, in her precise handwriting, the next 7 steps. She did not feel triumphant. She felt something closer to the sensation of load-bearing, of having weight distributed across her correctly at last, the right kind of pressure in the right places, her body finally arranged around something true. The baby kicked. Once. Definitive. She pressed her hand against her ribs and looked at the list she'd written and thought about her grandmother standing in a large kitchen, smelling of lavender and coffee, building something invisible for 30 years, waiting for the right Tuesday. The feeling you're having right now? Keep it. She kept it. And 3 floors below the penthouse she no longer lived in the building management office that had just received the formal trustee notification requiring acknowledgement and response. A junior administrator printed out the letter, looked at the name on it, and the junior administrator's name was Paul Devlin. 24 years old, 11 months into the job, the kind of person who followed procedures because procedures were the only firm ground in a building full of people who made decisions he wasn't cleared to understand. He printed the trustee notification letter, looked at the name on it, and walked it directly to the building's senior property manager, a woman named Sandra Cho, who had been managing the Meridian Tower for 9 years. Sandra read the letter once, then again. Then she picked up her phone and called the Meridian Operating Company's property liaison, which was the correct procedural step, the step the process required. And she did it without hesitation because Sandra Cho had survived 9 years in building management by doing the correct procedural step every single time, without exception, without allowing herself to consider the personal implications of what the correct procedural step might set in motion. The liaison didn't answer. Sandra left a message, logged the call, and placed the letter in the active correspondence file. Paul Devlin went back to his desk. By Monday morning, the Meridian Operating Company had received formal notification from 4 separate directions. The building management letter, the lease review notice from Hale and Associates, the trustee registration confirmation forwarded by the City Records Office, and a brief informational correspondence from the Empire Builder Gala Committee, noting a change in venue ownership and requesting confirmation of the event contract under the new trustee administration. 4 letters, 4 different envelopes, 4 different return addresses, all pointing, with quiet and absolute consistency, toward the same name. Luca read them in his office in the order they'd arrived. He read them slowly, which was not how he usually read things. He was a fast reader by nature, fast processor, fast reactor, the speed of a man who had learned early that hesitation was a form of surrender. He read these slowly because speed wouldn't help, and he knew it, because this was not a situation where reacting quickly gave you an advantage, because this was a situation where the advantage had already been established, weeks or months or possibly years before this Monday morning, and all the speed in the world wouldn't change the geometry of it. He finished the 4th letter. He put it down on the desk next to the other 3. He looked at the 4 of them arranged in a loose row and thought about the specific sensation he'd had at the window on Friday, the one he hadn't named. He named it now because there was no longer a reason not to. Humiliation, not defeat. Defeat was clean. Defeat was something that happened between equals in a contest where the rules were known. This was humiliation, which was different. Humiliation was what happened when you discovered that the contest had been happening for years before you understood you were in it, and that you had been losing it the whole time without knowing. He picked up his phone and called Curtis Greer. "I need the full picture," he said. "Every property I operate from, every lease, every address. I need you to tell me by tonight which of them are Ashcroft Trust properties." A silence. "Luca," Curtis said carefully, "I've already started that review." "And?" Another silence, longer, the kind of silence that was itself information. "How many?" Luca said. "I want to verify before I—" "Curtis, how many?" The number Curtis gave him was not the number he'd expected. It was larger. It accounted for properties he'd been operating from for over a decade, addresses that felt like foundations, addresses that had been part of the structure of his life in this city for so long that he'd stopped thinking of them as leased and had started thinking of them, without ever articulating it, without ever examining the assumption, as his. He ended the call. He sat in the office for 23 minutes without moving. Then he called Serena. She didn't answer. He called again. On the fourth call, she picked up, and her voice was what it had been in the lobby of the building. Steady, uninflected, the voice of someone who was not performing calm because they had arrived somewhere past the need for performance. "I'm in a meeting," she said. "You're not in a meeting, Serena. My attorney has requested that all communication go through. I know what your attorney requested." He heard his own voice, the flatness of it, the stripped quality, and recognized it as the voice he used when he was out of moves and knew it. "I'm not calling to negotiate. I'm calling because I want to understand something." A pause. "I'm listening," she said. "Your grandmother," he said. "When did she start doing this? The trust? The properties? How far back does this go?" A longer pause. "Why does that matter?" Serena said. "Because I want to know how long I've been walking around in a building someone else owned without knowing it," he said. "Because that is apparently a thing that happened, and I need to understand the timeline of it." Silence on the line. He could hear her breathing, slightly slower than normal, the deliberate rhythm of someone managing something. "Veronica's office will schedule a meeting," she said. "Bring your attorney. We can discuss—" "Serena." His voice cracked on her name. Not broke, cracked, a single hairline fracture, the kind that appears under pressure before the structural failure. "I need you to talk to me, not through lawyers, not through a process. Talk to me." The silence that followed was long enough that he thought she'd ended the call. Then she said, "Thursday, 2 o'clock, Veronica's office. Bring Curtis." The line went dead. Luca put his phone on the desk next to the 4 letters. He looked at them for another moment. Then he stood and walked to the window and looked out at the city and tried to locate, somewhere in the grid of it, the thing he was missing, the angle he hadn't seen, the move that remained available to him. He was good at this. He had spent 15 years being good at exactly this, finding the available move, the pressure point, the leverage that wasn't visible until you knew where to look. He couldn't find it. For the first time in 15 years, he genuinely could not find it. In the apartment below, Bianca was on the phone with her brand representative, her voice doing the thing it did when she was frightened but refusing to perform fright, higher in register than usual, faster, the words running together at the edges. The skincare company had sent a formal notice, not termination, preliminary notice, a grace period, a request for clarification about the property dispute and Bianca's current living situation. But preliminary notice from one sponsor had a way of becoming a signal to others, and Bianca's representative was not calling to reassure her. "You need to not be associated with this property dispute," the representative said. Her name was Dana, and she was the kind of woman who delivered bad news with the brisk efficiency of a weather report. "I don't care how you do it. You need to not be in that apartment, Bianca." "I live here," Bianca said. "You're staying there. That's different, and right now staying there is costing you." "Luca." "I don't know, Luca. I know your contracts. And 3 of them have morality or association clauses that this situation is bumping against." Dana's voice was not unkind. It was also not kind. It was surgical. "You need to make a decision about what you're prioritizing." Bianca ended the call and sat on the edge of the bed, her side of the bed, the side that had been Serena's side, and looked at the room and thought about the word prioritizing and what it meant in the context of a decision she had not previously understood she would have to make. She pulled up Serena's Instagram. Serena hadn't posted in 11 days. Her last post was from before everything, a photograph of autumn leaves in a park, captioned with nothing. 412 likes. Before the building notification letters, before the trustee registration, before any of it, just a woman posting a picture of leaves in a park with nothing to say about them. Bianca stared at it for a long time. Then she did something she would not tell Luca about for several days. She sent Serena a direct message. It said, "Can we talk?" Just us. No lawyers. She stared at what she'd written. Then she hit send before she could reconsider it, and put the phone face down on the mattress, and pressed her hands flat against her thighs, and sat with the particular quality of silence that follows an action you can't take back. Serena's reply came 40 minutes later. It said, "No, one word, that was all." Bianca picked up the phone, read the word, put the phone back down. She was still sitting on the edge of the bed when Luca came home that evening and found her there and asked what was wrong. And she said nothing, and he accepted the answer because he had his own nothing going on, and neither of them had the capacity for the other ones. They ate dinner in a silence that was not the comfortable kind. Tuesday came and went without the Moretti Operating Company submitting a written agenda to Veronica's office as requested. Wednesday came. By Wednesday afternoon, Veronica had initiated the formal lease review process, which did not require a response to proceed, only the absence of one within the specified window, and the window had closed. Thursday arrived. Serena put on a charcoal gray dress, one of the three she'd brought in the trash bag, which she had since supplemented at a quiet shop near the apartment, buying 4 things in neutral colors with her own money from the account Luca didn't know about. The dress fit her differently at 7 months than it had when she'd bought it, tighter across the stomach, looser in the shoulders, her body redistributing itself around the new architecture of pregnancy. She stood in front of the bathroom mirror and looked at herself for a moment, not checking her appearance exactly, but taking inventory, the way you check equipment before using it. She looked like herself. She looked tired in the specific way she'd looked tired for the past 3 months, the constant low-grade fatigue of carrying something, the pregnancy, the knowledge, the weight of what was coming. But underneath the tiredness, there was something else now. Something she kept coming back to when she looked in the mirror. A quality she hadn't had a word for until her grandmother's letter had given her one. Unbreakable. Not yet. She wasn't there yet. But she could feel the direction of it. She took a car to Veronica's office. She arrived 8 minutes early. She sat in the conference room with a glass of water and the trust document and waited. Luca arrived exactly on time, which was one of his defining characteristics. Never early, never late. The punctuality of a man who understood that arriving on time was its own form of control. Curtis Greer was with him, carrying a leather briefcase and wearing the careful expression of a lawyer who knew his client was in a difficult position and had already counseled him about how to behave in the next 2 hours. Luca looked at Serena when he walked in. She looked back. There was no version of this that wasn't strange. 8 years. 7 of them married. A person's face after 8 years of knowing it becomes something you don't see so much as recognize. It's just there, part of the furniture of your life, and you stop actually looking at it. Serena looked at Luca now the way she hadn't looked at him in years. The way you look at something when you're deciding what it's worth. He looked tired. She noted this without satisfaction. He looked like a man who had stopped sleeping correctly, which produced a specific quality of attention in his eyes. Heightened, slightly raw, the look of someone operating without the buffer that sleep provides. He sat down across from her. Curtis sat next to him. Veronica sat next to Serena. "Thank you for coming," Veronica said. She said it the way you say things that are formally necessary but carry no actual content. "Let's skip the pleasantries," Luca said. His voice was the stripped-down version. No performance layer. "I want to understand what this looks like going forward. All of it. The timeline, the properties, the lease situations. I want the full picture on the table." "The full picture is in the documents your attorney received on Monday," Veronica said. "I want to hear it from you." "Mr. Moretti?" Veronica's voice was pleasant and immovable. "You have excellent legal representation sitting beside you. This meeting is an opportunity for your counsel and mine to discuss a path forward that works for all parties. It is not an opportunity for informal conversations that could be interpreted differently by different people at a later date." She opened her own folder. "Shall we proceed?" Luca looked at Serena. "Serena," he said. "Don't," she said quietly. "I just want to—" "Don't use my name like that, like we're having a different conversation than we're having." She kept her voice level. "We're here to talk about the properties and the lease situation. Let's talk about that." Something moved across his face, not the professional neutrality, something underneath it, something less managed, the face he didn't show in meetings. He looked away first. Curtis opened his briefcase. The meeting lasted 90 minutes. It was precise and documented, and at no point did it become the thing Luca had wanted it to become. A human conversation, a negotiation between two people who knew each other, something that could be resolved through the personal rather than the legal. Veronica did not allow it. Serena did not allow it. Every time Luca's language drifted toward the personal, one of them redirected it, gently, firmly, back to the document in front of them. By the end of the 90 minutes, the following had been established. The lease review on the penthouse would proceed. The Moretti Operating Company could submit documentation within 10 days, demonstrating that the current occupancy situation was consistent with the lease terms, or the trust would proceed with formal notice. The office tower lease at 540 West Commercial was not under immediate review, but all future lease renewals would be subject to standard trustee approval. Luca signed the acknowledgement of receipt. Curtis signed beneath him. They stood to leave. Luca paused at the door. Serena was gathering the documents in front of her, not looking at him, her hands methodical and even. "Was any of it real?" he said. She stopped what she was doing, did not look up immediately. "Was what real?" she said. "The marriage. You. He stopped, looked at the door, then back. "I need to know if any of it was real or if the whole time you were just, 'I loved you,'" she said. She said it without looking up, her hands still on the papers, her voice carrying the specific weight of a true statement that has passed through grief and come out the other side without warmth. "For a long time, I loved you. And then you stopped making it possible, and I kept trying to make it possible anyway, which is the part I'm most embarrassed about." Now she looked up. "The trust was my grandmother's. I didn't know about it until the morning you handed me a trash bag. You can believe that or not, but it's true." He looked at her. "Okay," he said. He left. Curtis followed him, and the door closed, and Veronica let the silence sit for exactly 5 seconds before she said, "That went well." "Did it?" Serena said. "Better than expected." Veronica was already making notes. "He's not going to fight the lease review. His lawyer knows the ground isn't there." Serena nodded. She pressed her hands flat on the conference table. Then her phone buzzed. Not a call. A notification. She looked at it reflexively, the automatic response to the buzz, and what she saw on the screen made her go very still. It was a news alert. The headline read, "Ashcroft Trust Dispute. Documents leaked to financial press." She stared at it. "Veronica," she said. Veronica looked up from her notes. Serena turned the phone so she could see the screen. The silence in the room changed quality. Veronica took the phone. She read. She read the article in full, then went back and read the opening paragraph again, and Serena watched Veronica Hale's face do something she had not previously seen it do. It went uncertain. Not panicked, not undone, but uncertain, which in a face that was almost never uncertain was its own form of alarm. "The trust documents are confidential," Veronica said. Her voice had changed slightly. Precise in a different way. Careful now, picking through what she was saying. "The trustee registration is public record. The specific property inventory and valuation documents are not." "Someone leaked them," Serena said. "Someone with access to the specific documents leaked them, yes." They looked at each other. "Who has access?" Serena said. "My office," Veronica said. "The records office, where the registration was filed, but they only received the summary documentation, not the full inventory." She set the phone down on the table. "And the Moretti Operating Company, as named leaseholder, received copies of the trust inventory as part of the lease review notification. Standard disclosure." Serena felt something shift in her chest. Not the emotional shift, not grief or fury, she was past those as first responses. A structural shift, the shift of something she'd been standing on moving beneath her. "Luca had the full inventory," she said. "His attorney received it, yes. He just walked out of this room. Yes. And this article was published." Serena looked at the timestamp on the notification. 40 minutes ago. The meeting had started 90 minutes ago. 50 minutes into the meeting, while they had been sitting across from each other in this room, while Luca had been signing the acknowledgement of receipt, while Curtis Greer had been arranging his papers with his careful lawyer's composure, someone had released the trust inventory documents to the financial press. Not the public registration. The full inventory. With valuations. Serena picked up the phone and read the article properly, fully, the way you read something when it matters. The article laid out the Ashcroft Trust's holdings in detailed, specific, entirely accurate terms. It named the properties. It named the valuations. It named the businesses operating from those properties, including Luca Moretti's, but also including 3 other major operators in the city, men who had not known they were on trust properties, Men who would now be receiving calls from their own boards and investors and lawyers asking what exactly their lease exposure looked like. Men who would not be pleased. Men who had, in some cases, significant reach. "This isn't just about me," Serena said slowly. "This article, the way it's written, it's not targeting me specifically. It's presenting the trust as a disruption to multiple business interests." "Yes," Veronica said. "Luca has relationships with some of these people." "Some of them." Serena set the phone down. "He didn't leak this to hurt me," she said. "He leaked this to create a coalition." She heard herself say it and felt the shape of it, the specific intelligence of the move, not elegant but effective. The move of a man who knew he'd lost the ground he was standing on and was trying to change the terrain entirely. If all of these business interests push back simultaneously against the trust, it creates pressure I can't absorb from one direction. It distributes the conflict. It makes me the problem rather than him. Veronica was quiet. "That is, she said, a reasonable interpretation. Is it wrong?" A pause. "No," Veronica said. Serena sat with this. She had been careful. She had been thorough. She had been, as she'd told Veronica at the beginning, boring and legal and utterly undeniable. And none of that had been wrong. None of it had been insufficient. But she had been thinking of this as a contained situation. Herself, Luca, the properties, the legal process. And it was not contained anymore. It was public. It was distributed. And the men whose business interests were now named in a financial news article were going to be making calls today, tonight, tomorrow morning, and some of those calls were going to be the kind of calls that Luca Moretti was very good at receiving. Her phone buzzed again. Another notification. Then another. Then her phone began ringing. An unfamiliar number. And then another. And then Veronica's desk phone rang as well. And Veronica's assistant's voice came through the intercom saying that there were 3 calls holding and 2 journalists requesting comment and a Mr. Harrison from the Meridian Business Council asking for an urgent conversation. Serena looked at the phone ringing in her hand. She looked at the window. She thought about this meeting, about Luca's face when he'd asked if any of it was real, about the timing, 50 minutes in, while he sat across from her, someone had released the documents. While he looked at her with his tired eyes and his stripped-down voice, someone on his instruction, or his attorney's instruction, had been sitting somewhere with a phone executing the other half of this morning's plan. He had come to the meeting to buy time. She had given it to him. The phone rang in her hand. Veronica was already on her desk phone, her voice low and crisp, managing the first of the calls with the precise efficiency of a woman who had navigated crises before and understood that the first 60 seconds of a response established the shape of everything that followed. Serena set her phone face up on the table and looked at the ceiling and took 1 breath, 4 counts in, 2 hold, 6 out, and let herself feel for exactly the duration of that breath the full weight of what had just shifted. Then she exhaled and picked up the phone and she picked up the phone and answered it. The voice on the other end was male, clipped, the voice of a man accustomed to being the one who initiated calls rather than received them. He identified himself as Richard Holt, executive director of the Meridian Business Council, and he did not waste time on pleasantries because men like Richard Holt had learned long ago that pleasantries were for people who needed something, and he did not, at this particular moment, need anything except clarity. "Ms. Ashcroft," he said, "I assume you've seen the article." "I have," Serena said. "Then you understand that several of our member organizations are now in a position of significant uncertainty regarding their lease exposure." "I understand they're in a position of significant uncertainty regarding their knowledge of their lease exposure," she said. "The exposure itself has existed for some time." A pause. He didn't like that. She could hear him not liking it. "Be that as it may," he said, "the public disclosure of this information has created a situation that requires management. Our members are calling for an emergency council session. They're requesting your presence." "When?" "Tonight." Serena looked at Veronica, who was on the desk phone but watching her, one eyebrow fractionally raised. The Veronica Hale version of alarm. "I'll need to consult with my attorney," Serena said. "Of course. But Ms. Ashcroft, I want to be direct with you. There are interests represented in this council that extend well beyond real estate. The kind of interests that prefer resolution to conflict and have resources to pursue either. He paused, letting that breathe. We'd like very much for this to be a resolution conversation. So would I, Serena said. I'll call you back within the hour. She ended the call. Veronica hung up her own phone at the same moment. They looked at each other across the conference room table with the documents spread between them and the city going about its business beyond the window. Holt, Serena said. I gathered. Veronica came back to the table. She sat down and folded her hands and looked at Serena with the expression she wore when she was about to say something the other person might not want to hear. The Business Council represents 11 major operators with trust property lease exposure. 3 of them have, she chose the word carefully, complicated business histories. Luca's kind of complicated, Serena said. Adjacent to it, yes. He organized this, Serena said. The leak, the council meeting, all of it. He walked out of this building and made 3 calls and had this assembled inside an hour. It appears so. Serena pressed her fingertips against the table. He wants me in a room with 11 people who are angry and have resources, and he thinks the weight of that will... She stopped, finished the thought internally. Will make me fold. Will make me settle for less than I'm owed, because the alternative is a coalition of powerful men making my life difficult in ways that go beyond property law. She looked at Veronica. Can they actually do anything? She said. Legally. The trust is documented, the trustee registration is filed, the leases are what they are. Can a business council emergency session change any of that? Not directly, Veronica said, but they can make the practical administration of the trust significantly more complicated. They can challenge lease terms. They can dispute property valuations. They can file injunctions, none of which will succeed ultimately, but all of which take time and money and create the kind of sustained pressure designed to make you prefer a negotiated settlement, which is what Luca wants, Serena said. A negotiated settlement on his terms, control over the process. Yes. And if I don't go to the meeting? Then the signal you send is either confidence or weakness, depending on how you frame it. Not going without explanation reads as fear. Not going with the right explanation reads as... Veronica paused. Something else entirely. Serena stood up. She walked to the window. 31st floor, the city at eye level, the way she preferred it. She looked at the buildings across the street, at the people moving on the sidewalk below, at the ordinary Thursday afternoon proceeding without any knowledge of or interest in what was happening in this room. 47 properties, 11 council members, 1 gala in 5 weeks, and a ballroom she owned. She turned back. I'm not going to the emergency session, she said. I'm going to send a letter, tonight, to each council member individually from this office, formally introducing myself as the Ashcroft Trust's controlling trustee, confirming that all existing lease agreements will be honored through their current terms, and inviting each party to schedule individual consultations at their convenience. Veronica looked at her. That's, she started. It removes the coalition dynamics, Serena said. Luca needs them angry and collective. 11 angry people in a room build off each other's energy. 11 people who've each received a courteous individual letter from their landlord have a different conversation with themselves. She came back to the table. And it's the correct thing to do. These businesses have legitimate lease exposure concerns. They deserve a real answer. They don't deserve to be used as Luca's pressure tactic. Veronica was quiet for a moment. Your grandmother, she said, would have made the same call. I know, Serena said. Write the letters. I'll review them by 4. She picked up her phone and called Richard Holt back. Mr. Holt, she said when he answered, I won't be attending the emergency session this evening. You'll receive a formal letter from Hale and Associates within the hour. I'd suggest you read it before the session begins. A silence. Ms. Ashcroft. Good afternoon, she said, and ended the call. She sat back down. Her back was screaming. The low chronic ache had sharpened in the last hour, the kind of pain that came from sustained tension in muscles already taxed by the pregnancy. She pressed her hand against the small of her back and breathed. You need to eat something, Veronica said. I need to finish this. You need to eat something and then finish this. Veronica's voice carried something that wasn't quite maternal, but was adjacent to it. The tone of someone who had been watching over this situation for longer than Serena knew and was not going to stop now. You have a child to consider. Serena looked at her. I know, she said, softer. I know. Buying. The 11 letters went out at 4:45. By 6 o'clock, 3 council members had responded with requests for individual consultations. By 8, 2 more had replied. Richard Holt's office did not respond, which told Serena that Holt remained in Luca's camp, or at least in the camp that was waiting to see how the coalition held before committing to anything. The coalition didn't hold. Luca would discover this the following morning when he walked into the Business Council emergency session and found that instead of 11 allies, he had 6, and that 3 of those 6 were already having private second thoughts, and that the energy in the room was less organized fury and more anxious self-interest. The energy of people who had looked at the individual letter from the Ashcroft Trust and thought, "My lease is fine through its current term, and this woman seems like someone who knows exactly what she's doing." He left the session after 40 minutes. Curtis called Veronica's office at noon. "He wants to talk about the gala," Curtis said. "The gala," Veronica said, "is not a negotiating point. The venue contract is a trust matter. He's aware of that. He wants to discuss the public nature of the situation, the award ceremony. He'd like to know if there's a way to—" "The gala proceeds as scheduled," Veronica said. "The award committee has been notified of the ownership change. Their determination about the event is entirely their own. If Mr. Moretti has concerns about the event, he should address them to the award committee." A pause. "He's going to receive the award," Curtis said. "He intends to be there." "He's welcome to attend any public event held in a trust property," Veronica said. "The trust does not control guest lists." She ended the call and looked at Serena, who had heard every word from across the desk. "He's going," Serena said. "He's going." Serena nodded slowly. She understood it. Luca was going to stand in that ballroom and receive that award because walking away would be its own form of defeat, a public concession, and he was not yet at the point where he could absorb that. He was going to put on the custom tuxedo and stand at the podium and hold the thing and perform the version of himself that the city had always known, the version that occupied space without apology, and he was going to hope that the performance was convincing enough to hold the remaining pieces together. She understood it because she understood him still, despite everything. 8 years of knowing a person leaves you with their architecture even when you no longer want to live in it. "What's the award committee's position?" she said. "They're proceeding with the ceremony," Veronica said, "but they've added a program note acknowledging the change in venue ownership. And—" She paused in the precise way she paused when something was about to matter. "They've agreed to include the Trust's formal ownership disclosure in the information packet distributed to attendees." Serena looked at her. "Every attendee," Veronica said. "Every investor, business partner, political contact in that room will receive the full ownership disclosure as part of their program materials." The room was very quiet. Serena thought about the ballroom. She had been in it twice, once for a charity function 3 years ago, once for a business dinner Luca had hosted. It was spectacular in the way that spaces built to impress are spectacular. Crystal chandeliers, marble floors, the kind of architectural confidence that said money had been here for a long time and intended to stay. She had stood in that ballroom and felt, both times, the particular sensation of being in a space that belonged to her family without knowing that it did. She knew it now. "I'm not going," she said. Veronica looked at her. "To the gala. I'm not going." Serena's voice was certain. "I don't need to be there. The disclosure packet is enough. Me being there makes it about a confrontation. Me not being there makes it about him, about what he built and what it was built on. He should stand in that room and receive that award in front of everyone who matters to him, and he should do it while they're all holding a piece of paper with my name on it. That's enough." Veronica considered this for a long moment. "That," she said finally, "is more than enough." The night of the Empire Builder Gala arrived on a Friday in late October when the city had gone cold and clear, the kind of autumn night that made the buildings look sharp against the sky like something cut from black paper. Serena was in her apartment. She had ordered dinner, Thai food, the place 2 blocks away that delivered in under 30 minutes. And she was sitting at the small dining table in the charcoal dress she'd worn to Veronica's office, not because she was going anywhere, but because she'd put it on that morning and never changed, and it had become the working uniform of this particular period of her life. Her phone was on the table. She ate. She was almost finished when the first call came in. Not to her directly, but to Veronica, who texted her a summary. "Room is full. Disclosure packets distributed. 3 investors have already been on phones in lobby. She set down her fork. Across the city, in the Meridian Grand Ballroom, on the ground floor of the building, with her name in the ownership records, Luca Moretti was standing at a pre-ceremony reception with a glass of sparkling water. He didn't drink at events, never had, the professional discipline of a man who understood that clarity was an asset. And he was watching people's faces change. The changes were subtle at first. The slight recalibration of attention, the way a conversation partner's eyes would go to the program packet and then back to his face with a fractionally altered expression. Not hostile, not overtly anything, but different. Recalculated. The face of someone who has been given new information and is quietly running it against their existing model of the world. A banking partner he had known for 7 years excused himself after 4 minutes of conversation to take a call. Another contact, a property developer whose projects had overlapped with Luca's for a decade, shook his hand with the handshake of someone completing an obligation and moved away. Luca held his water glass and watched the room. His mother was there. Carmela Moretti, 63, the boutique owner, the woman whose lease renewal on Ashford Row was now contingent on Serena's trustee approval. She came to him at the 15-minute mark with the expression she wore when she was frightened and expressing it as anger. "What is this?" she said. Not a question. "Mother, I got a letter, Luca, about my lease, about my shops." Her voice was low, controlled, the fury of a woman who had spent decades learning to keep her volume down in public. The letter came from a law firm, and it had Serena's name on it. "I know." "You told me—" She stopped, glanced around, came closer. "You told me the separation was managed. You told me she had nothing." "I was wrong about what she had," he said. The silence between them held everything that statement contained. "How wrong?" she said. He looked at the room, at the investors moving toward the banquet tables, at the program packet sitting next to every place setting, the Ashcroft Trust disclosure visible on page 3 to anyone who opened them, at the chandeliers above it all, burning bright and indifferent. "Significantly," he said. Carmela pressed her lips together. "Fix it," she said, and walked away. He watched her go. His phone vibrated in his jacket pocket. He looked at it. A message from Curtis. "Bianca's brand rep has issued public statement. She's terminated the relationship with the penthouse effective end of month." Posted it. He read it twice. Then he put the phone back in his pocket. Bianca had posted. Of course she'd posted. Bianca processed everything through the act of posting. Existence confirmed through documentation. And she'd apparently decided that the documentation of her exit was preferable to the documentation of her continued association with a situation that was costing her contracts. He didn't blame her. He found somewhat to his surprise that he didn't feel much about it at all. A numbness where the feeling should have been. The anesthesia of a man who had sustained too many pressure points in too short a time. He was called to the stage at 8:45. The room arranged itself. 700 people finding their seats, the low rumble of conversation settling, the particular quality of collective attention turning toward the front. Luca walked to the podium with the walk he had refined over 15 years of being watched in rooms like this. Measured, unhurried, the walk of a man who occupied the floor he was standing on. He stood at the podium. The award presenter, a city councilwoman he'd known for 6 years, who had read her program packet, whose expression when she handed him the glass trophy was 3 degrees cooler than it would have been an hour ago, stepped back. He looked out at the room. 700 faces. Investors, partners, city officials, people whose relationships with him had been built over years, through dinners and meetings and the careful accumulation of mutual interest. People holding program packets with page 3 turned to the Ashcroft Trust disclosure. People whose phones had buzzed with the formal ownership notification that Veronica had sent simultaneously to all registered business contacts of the trust at 8:31, 14 minutes ago. Every phone in the room had buzzed. He had felt the collective vibration of it from backstage, the sound of 400 phones registering a notification at the same moment. Not loud, but pervasive, the distributed hum of information arriving everywhere simultaneously. He stood at the podium and held the glass trophy and looked at the room. He was supposed to give a speech. He had a speech. He had written it with Curtis 3 weeks ago, 240 words. The speech of a man at the apex of his influence accepting recognition from a city that knew his name and would continue to know it. He had the speech in his jacket pocket. He did not reach for it. He stood at the podium and looked at the faces and felt, with a clarity that was almost physical, the specific sensation of a room full of people revising their opinion of him in real time. Not abandoning him, not yet, not all of them, but revising, recalculating, repositioning their relationship to him in light of new information. The way you reposition yourself in a room when you discover the floor is less solid than you thought. He opened his mouth, and then every phone in the room buzzed again. Not a notification this time, a different pattern, the pattern of an incoming video. The room's attention fractured, the way it does when 700 people receive something simultaneously, and 70 of them check it immediately, and 30 of those make an expression that the people around them notice. Luca watched it happen in real time from the podium, watched the ripple move through the crowd, heads dipping toward phones and coming back up with changed faces. From somewhere to his left, he heard a sound. The sound of chairs being pushed back, not one chair, multiple chairs. The particular scrape of people standing to leave. He looked toward the sound. 3 people at a table near the left wall were gathering their things, not urgently, not dramatically, with the quiet efficiency of people who had received information and made a decision and were acting on it without feeling the need to explain themselves to the room. Then 2 more, at a different table. A banker he'd known for 8 years put his phone in his pocket and leaned to say something to his wife, and they both stood, and she picked up her evening bag and they walked toward the exit without looking at the stage. Luca stood at the podium. He looked at the trophy in his hand, heavy, cold at the base where the glass was thickest, the kind of weight that was supposed to feel like accomplishment, and instead felt like he searched for the word and found it with the terrible precision of a man who was done lying to himself about things, like held air, like the specific gravity of something that had been solid and was now showing what it was made of under pressure. His phone was in his pocket. He knew, without looking at it, what the second notification had been. The precise, documented, legally unimpeachable ownership disclosure, not the one in the program packet, which was a courtesy, a piece of paper that could be folded and ignored, but the formal trust notification delivered to every registered business contact, with attached documentation, with specific property addresses, with his name on 3 of them as current leaseholder. From the podium, he could see exactly 4 empty seats where there had been people sitting 90 seconds ago. He looked for Bianca's table. She was not at it. He looked for his mother. She was still seated, her back straight, her face arranged with the terrifying composure of a woman who would not give the room the satisfaction of watching her react. He looked at the podium in front of him, at the microphone, at the 700 people, now 670, now fewer, waiting for him to say something. He thought about Serena in the lobby, the trash bag, her face when the elevator doors closed. He thought about the letter from her grandmother, 8 words on an envelope. He thought about Serena saying, "I loved you. For a long time, I loved you." He thought about 14 months of Bianca and the dinner parties and the social media and the green dress and all of it, the whole elaborate architecture of the life he'd been building in the space where his marriage used to be. And he felt, standing at that podium holding that trophy, the precise moment when a structure built on insufficient foundation understands what it is. He looked out at the room. He said, "Thank you." 2 words. That was all. He stepped back from the podium. He walked off the stage. He walked through the backstage corridor and out the service exit at the rear of the building and stood in the cold October air in the alley behind the Meridian Grand Ballroom, and he breathed. In and out. The air tasted like exhaust and autumn, and the specific coldness of a city that didn't care about any individual thing happening inside it. His phone buzzed, a text from a number he didn't recognize. He looked at it. The ballroom is owned by the Ashcroft Legacy Trust. The trust's controlling trustee is Serena Ashcroft. You are standing in her building. No signature, no follow-up message. He looked at the phone for a long time. Then he looked up at the building behind him. 52 floors of glass and steel and the architectural confidence of old money rising into the black October sky. Somewhere up there, on the floor he had been living on for 4 years, in the apartment that was not his apartment in the building that had never been his building. His things were in the closets, and his name was on the lease, and Bianca's exit had been posted to social media 40 minutes ago. Somewhere across the city, on the 18th floor of a building with a different address, Serena Ashcroft was eating Thai food at a small dining table and her phone was showing her the notifications as they arrived. The message from Veronica, the social media posts, the tracking of investors leaving the gala in real time through the eyes of the Trust's documentation team. And she was reading them with the steady attention of a woman who had prepared for this moment for longer than she'd known she was preparing for it. He put the phone in his pocket. He stood in the alley. The service door opened behind him. A waiter in a white jacket came out carrying a bag of trash. The actual physical kind, black plastic, the same kind he'd handed Serena on a Tuesday morning that felt like it had happened in a different life, and nodded at him without recognition and tossed it in the dumpster and went back inside. Luca looked at the trash bag in the dumpster. The cold air moved through the alley. Inside the ballroom, 650 people were sitting with program packets and ownership disclosures, and the particular kind of silence that descends when the main event has ended unexpectedly and nobody is quite sure what the appropriate response is. The award sat on the podium where he'd left it. Nobody had picked it up yet. And in Veronica Halo's office, the documentation team had already begun compiling the evening's record. The timestamps, the notification confirmations, the attendance tracking, the social media documentation of Bianca's public exit, each piece a tile in the legal mosaic that was now, after tonight, essentially, the documentation team finished their compilation at 11:47 that night. Veronica sent Serena the summary file at midnight with a single line of text beneath it. "It's done. Get some sleep." Serena read the file. She read it the way she'd been reading everything for the past 3 weeks, thoroughly, without rushing, without letting the emotional weight of any individual item pull her off the factual ground. The gala attendance numbers, the notification confirmations, the time-stamped record of investor departures, Bianca's public statement, screenshotted and archived. The award, per the venue staff's end-of-evening report, had been retrieved from the podium by the event coordinator and placed in storage. Nobody had claimed it. She closed the file. She sat at the small dining table in the apartment on the 18th floor and looked at the window and the city beyond it, the nighttime version, the version that was all lit windows and dark spaces between them, the version that looked like a map of everywhere people were still awake. She pressed one hand flat on the table and one hand against her stomach and felt the baby's particular 3 a.m. restlessness beginning to stir, the familiar kick and shift, the reminder that there was a person in there with her own agenda entirely unrelated to property law and gala attendance records and the careful architecture of a war that was, as of tonight, essentially over. She said quietly to no one in the room, "We did it." The baby kicked. She wasn't sure if that was agreement or coincidence. She chose to take it as agreement. She went to bed at 12:30 and slept until 7, the longest unbroken sleep she'd had since the Tuesday morning with the trash bag. And when she woke up, the city outside the window was gray and cold and beginning to rain, and she lay there for a moment listening to the rain on the glass and feeling, not triumph, not relief exactly, something quieter than both of those things. The particular quality of stillness that comes after sustained effort has arrived at its destination, and the body finally understands that the emergency is over. Her phone had 14 missed notifications. She put it face down on the nightstand and went to make coffee. Luca called at 9:15, not through Curtis, not through Veronica's office, his number directly, the number she still had because deleting it had felt, at various points over the past 3 weeks, like either a necessary act of self-preservation or a petty one, and she'd never resolved which, so it was still there. She answered. "I want to meet," he said. "Not with lawyers, just us." She poured her coffee. "Why?" "Because I have things to say that aren't legal matters." Luca, not to negotiate, not to ask for anything. His voice was different again, different from the meeting in Veronica's office, different from the phone calls. It had lost the last layer of management. What was underneath was tired in a way that went deeper than sleep deprivation. "I just need to say some things, and I need you to hear them from me directly, not through a process." She stood at the kitchen window with her coffee and looked at the rain. She thought about saying no. She assembled the reasons for it, the clean procedural logic of keeping everything through proper channels, the self-protective wisdom of not giving him access to the version of her that existed outside the legal framework, the simple fact that she didn't owe him anything. She held all of that. Then she said, "Noon. There's a cafe on Brennan Street called Ellery's. I'll be there at noon." A pause. "Thank you," he said. She ended the call and finished her coffee standing at the window, watching the rain move across the city in curtains, the kind of rain that didn't commit to anything, just persisted. Ellery's was the kind of place that had been there for 30 years and looked it. Worn wooden tables, mismatched chairs, the smell of coffee and old wood, and something baked. The kind of place that existed outside of the city's appetite for renovation because it had regulars who would have grieved it and an owner who wasn't interested in selling. Serena had found it 2 weeks ago, walking in the rain when her back had needed movement and the apartment had felt too small. She'd sat in the corner booth for an hour with a decaf and a book she wasn't really reading and felt for the first time since the Tuesday of the trash bag, something that resembled ordinary life. She arrived at 5 to noon. She took the corner booth. She ordered decaf and a piece of toast because the baby wanted carbohydrates constantly and she had stopped questioning it. Luca arrived at noon exactly. He looked like he hadn't slept in a way that went beyond last night. He was in a dark coat, no tie, the same fundamental uniform but wearing it differently. The coat slightly wrong on his shoulders, the way clothes sit when the person inside them has lost some structural certainty. He stood in the doorway of the cafe for a moment, spotted her, and came across the room. He sat down across from her. A waitress came. He ordered coffee, black, and the waitress left, and they sat with the rain on the windows and the cafe making its small background sounds, and the specific loaded quality of a silence between two people who have 8 years of history and no longer know which parts of it are load-bearing. "You look tired," she said. It came out without inflection, not unkind, not kind, factual. "I am tired," he said. She waited. He put both hands around the coffee mug the waitress had brought and looked at them. His hands. She had known those hands for 8 years, and they looked, this afternoon, like the hands of someone older than he was. "I didn't know about the trust," he said. "I know. I want you to believe that." "I do believe it," she said. "It doesn't change much, but I believe it." He nodded. His jaw moved. "The leak. The financial press article. I need you to know that was Curtis, not me. He made a call I didn't authorize. I found out after." He looked up. "I fired him." Serena looked at him. "That doesn't—" she started. "I know it doesn't fix it. I'm not telling you because I want credit. I'm telling you because I need there to be a true account of what happened, somewhere, even if it's only in this room." His voice was level, but she could hear the effort underneath the level, the specific effort of a man saying things he had not previously allowed himself to say. "I handled this wrong. From the beginning. The way it happened, the morning, He stopped. "The bag." She said nothing. "That was—" He paused for a long time, looking for a word that apparently wasn't available to him. "That was a contemptible thing to do. And I knew it when I did it. I told myself it was practical. I told myself you were strong enough to handle it, that you'd be fine, that—" He stopped again. "I told myself stories that made the thing I was doing easier to do. That's all I was doing, telling stories to make myself easier to live with." The rain on the window. Serena wrapped both hands around her own mug, the warmth of it. She looked at him and felt something she hadn't expected to feel. Not softness exactly, not forgiveness, but something more complex and less comfortable than either of those things. Recognition. The recognition of a person who had also, at various points, told herself stories to make the thing she was doing easier to do, who had stayed in a marriage past the point of staying in it because the story she told about why she was staying was more bearable than the truth. They were not the same. What he had done and what she had done were not the same. But they were both people who had used narrative to survive the distance between who they were and what they needed to believe about themselves. "Why Bianca?" she said. Not accusatory. She actually wanted to know. He looked at the table. "She was uncomplicated," he said. "At the time that felt like a thing I needed. Something that didn't require," he searched, "maintenance. Something that didn't know enough about me to have expectations." "I had expectations," Serena said. "You had accurate ones," he said. "That's worse." She absorbed this. "She's gone?" Serena said. "She left the penthouse last week. He paused, the pause of a man choosing a word carefully. "Not in contact." "She'll be fine," Serena said. And meant it, actually. Bianca was 26 and resilient and had the specific resource of someone who had never had to develop depth because the surface had always been sufficient, and that was neither an insult nor a compliment, just a fact. She'd find her footing. She wasn't built for what that situation became. No, he said. Neither were you, she said. Not this version of it. He looked at her. What does that mean? He said. It means you're good at power when you have it, she said. You're very good at that. You're not as good at the rest of it, the part where you lose something and have to figure out who you are without it. She said it without cruelty. Most people aren't. You just never had to find out before. He was quiet for a long time. I don't know how to do this, he said. What comes next? Custody, the child, being... He stopped. I don't know how to be a father in the context of this. You learn, she said, or you don't. That's the only option. I want to, he said. I want to try to be... He stopped again, and this time the stopping was different. The stop of someone who has run out of the language they normally use and hasn't yet found the new kind. His eyes did something she hadn't seen them do before, something close to the surface. I'm sorry, he said. I know it doesn't... It's not nothing, she said. Don't perform it. Don't dress it up. But it's not nothing. He nodded. They sat with that. The waitress came back and asked if they wanted anything else, and they both said no, and she left and the cafe went on around them, the ordinary afternoon business of a place that had been here 30 years and would be here 30 more, indifferent and warm. The penthouse, Luca said. Veronica's office will send the new lease terms, Serena said. For the operating company's office space, the tower on West Commercial. The penthouse lease will not be renewed. You have 45 days. He nodded. He'd known this was coming. She could see that he'd known and had been deciding whether to contest it and had decided not to. Your mother's boutiques, she said. The Ashford Row leases will be renewed at current market rate. She'll need to work with the trust's property management team for the paperwork. He looked up. She held his gaze. I'm not doing this to punish her, Serena said. She can keep her shops. The leases are renewable. But the renewal goes through the trust, and the trust is mine, and that's the way it is. It'll be difficult for her, coming to you. Yes, Serena said. I imagine it will. A beat. She should have been kinder to you, he said. Over the years. She wasn't kind to you, and I let that happen. Serena looked at him. A lot of things happened that you let happen, she said. We don't need to catalog them. She picked up her coffee. I'm not interested in punishing anyone, Luca, including you. I'm interested in running the trust correctly, raising my daughter with as much stability as I can build, and not spending the next 10 years managing the wreckage of this marriage instead of my own life. He looked at his hands again. My daughter, he said quietly. Our daughter, she said. You're her father. Nothing that happened between us changes that. But how much of her life you get to be part of, that's going to be determined by the choices you make going forward. Not these ones. The new ones. He nodded again. He looked like a man who was doing the specific work of absorbing things he couldn't argue with and would have to carry. It was not a comfortable thing to watch. She watched it anyway because looking away felt dishonest, and she was done with the dishonest kind of comfort. I'll do the parenting program, he said. The one the court will probably recommend. I'll do it properly, not because it's required. Good, she said. And He stopped, started again. I want her to know I'm her father. Not through intermediaries, not through legal arrangements. I want her to know I showed up. Then show up, Serena said, simply, without drama. He looked at her for a long moment. You're going to be extraordinary, he said. You know that. As a mother, you're going to be... Don't, she said. Not unkindly. Don't tell me what I'm going to be. I'll find out. He almost smiled. It was the ghost of the smile she'd fallen in love with 8 years ago. The smile of a man who had a sense of humor about himself under all the armor, and seeing the ghost of it was the strangest moment of the whole afternoon. Stranger than the legal meetings, stranger than the gala, stranger than any of it. The particular grief of recognizing someone you used to know in the face of the person they'd become. She felt it, and let it pass through her and didn't reach for it or push it away. "I should go," he said. "Yes," she said. He stood, put on his coat, stood at the edge of the table for a moment with the rain on the windows behind him and the cafe going on around them. "The building," he said. "The tower. I want you to know. I understand it now. What your grandmother did. Why she did it the way she did it." He paused. "It was brilliant. It was the most brilliant thing I've ever seen, and I'm on the wrong end of it, so that's saying something." Serena looked at him. "She wasn't doing it to you," she said. "She didn't know you'd exist. She was doing it for me, for whoever I'd need to be when I needed it." He absorbed this. "She sounds like she was something," he said. "She was everything," Serena said. He left. She watched him go. Through the cafe, past the other tables, out the door into the rain, which received him the way it received everything, without comment. She watched him walk past the window with his coat collar up, and then he was gone. Absorbed into the gray afternoon, just another person in a coat in a city full of them. She sat for a while longer. She finished her coffee. She ate the toast. She watched the rain. She thought about nothing in particular, which was itself a luxury she had not had for 3 weeks. The ability to simply sit in a warm place with empty hands and let the afternoon be what it was. The baby was quiet, the rare mid-afternoon stillness. Serena sat with her hands in her lap and the empty mug in front of her and felt moving through her like weather the full weight of the past 3 weeks, the past 7 months, the past 8 years. She let herself feel it, all of it. The grief of the marriage, because there was grief despite everything. Because you don't spend 8 years building a life with someone without the demolition of it, leaving a specific kind of rubble. And the anger, which was still there beneath everything, would probably always be there in some form, the compressed sediment of it. And underneath both of those things, something that had been there the whole time, that had been there in the lobby when she'd opened the envelope, that had been there in Veronica's office when the numbers had settled into their shapes, that had been there in the cafe on the day she'd found it, and felt, for the first time, like ordinary life. She knew what to call it now. She'd been trying to name it for weeks and had kept reaching for words that were too large or too small. Triumph, relief, peace, and none of them had fit. The thing she felt wasn't any of those. It was more specific, less dramatic. It was the feeling of weight distributed correctly, of a structure finally arranged around its real foundation instead of a borrowed one. Of being, for the first time in a very long time, exactly where she was supposed to be inside her own life. She left a tip. She put on her coat. She walked out into the rain. Arabella Ashcroft was born on a Wednesday in December at 6:41 in the morning in a hospital that occupied the ground 2 floors of a building that was, quietly and without announcement, an Ashcroft Trust property. Serena did not point this out to anyone. She held her daughter in the white-lit room and felt the specific staggering weight of her. 6 pounds 11 ounces, dark hair, the particular old man seriousness of a newborn's face, the face of someone who had just completed something enormously difficult and was reserving judgment about what came next. And she did not think about the trust or the properties or the gala or the legal documentation that was still being processed in offices around the city. She thought about a kitchen that smelled like lavender and coffee. She thought about a small woman who had answered questions with real answers. She thought about an envelope on a nightstand and 8 words written in precise small letters. Veronica came to the hospital that afternoon with flowers. Not extravagant, a small bunch of something seasonal from the shop on the corner. The flowers of a woman who understood that the gesture mattered more than the size of it. She sat in the chair by the bed and looked at Arabella with an expression that contained 34 years of professional composure and something older than that. Something underneath the composure that had nothing to do with law. "She looks like Margaret," Veronica said. Serena looked at her daughter. "Does she?" she said, around the eyes. "The way she's looking at everything, like she's already filing it away." Veronica's voice was quiet. "Your grandmother had that, from the day I met her. Like everything was going in a folder somewhere, and she'd retrieve it when it was useful." Serena looked at Arabella's eyes. Dark, unreadable, ancient the way newborn eyes are ancient. "I'm going to tell her," Serena said, "about the trust, about everything, when she's old enough. I'm not going to wait. I'm not going to protect her from it the way Gran protected me." "No," Veronica said. "I didn't think you would." I'll do it differently. She'll know what she has, and she'll still have to figure out who she is. But she'll know. Veronica nodded. What does her father know? She said. That she exists, that she's healthy, that he's welcome to be part of her life if he does the work. Serena adjusted Arabella against her chest. He sent flowers this morning from the hospital gift shop. Nothing dramatic, just flowers. That's a start, Veronica said. It's a start, Serena agreed. They sat together in the quiet room with the winter light coming through the window, the particular flat white light of December, and Arabella slept against Serena's chest with the absolute confidence of someone who had not yet learned that sleep was a place you had to feel safe before you could go. The months that followed were not simple. Serena had not expected them to be simple and was not disappointed. Running the trust was work, real work, the specific and demanding work of managing 47 properties and the people who depended on them, of making decisions about lease terms and development projects, and the kind of institutional giving that her grandmother had built into the trust's mandate. She hired a property management team and a trust administrator, and kept Veronica as primary legal counsel, and worked from the financial district office she'd set up in a spare suite on the 28th floor of one of the trust's towers, with Arabella in a bassinet beside her desk for the first 3 months, because the alternatives were insufficient, and she had decided, with the same deliberate precision she brought to everything now, that this was simply how it was going to be. The Ashcroft Foundation, which she established in the trust's 6th month under her active management, focused on 3 things: housing stability for women leaving crisis situations, legal aid access for people who couldn't afford the kind of representation that had saved her, and financial literacy programs for women who had, as Serena had, spent years adjacent to wealth without understanding its mechanics. She named the legal aid program after her grandmother, the Margaret Ashcroft Legal Fund. She liked the way it looked on the letterhead, small, precise letters, the handwriting she still saw in her dreams sometimes, still heard in the particular quality of silence that follows a real answer to a real question. Luca did the parenting program. He did it, Serena was told by the family court mediator, without complaint and without the particular kind of performance that men in his position sometimes brought to required processes. The performance of compliance that was actually resistance. He did it the way he apparently did things when he'd decided to do them, which was completely and without visible ambivalence. He began weekly visits with Arabella when she was 4 months old. He was awkward with her, initially, with the specific awkwardness of a powerful man holding something genuinely fragile for the first time and understanding that power was not useful equipment for this particular task. He kept coming anyway. Serena watched this from the regulated distance of their legal arrangement and felt about it what she felt about it, which was complicated and layered and not something she was going to simplify for the sake of a cleaner story. He was Arabella's father. He was becoming, in his imperfect and still learning way, present. That was not nothing. It was also not what she'd once thought their family would be. She held both of those things and moved forward. Carmela Moretti came to the Trust's property management office on a Tuesday in February to sign the renewed boutique leases. She wore the same kind of composed, armored face she always wore in situations she found humiliating. She sat across from the property administrator, not Serena. Serena had decided this should go through the office rather than be made into a confrontation, and signed 3 renewal agreements at market rate and received copies and stood to leave. At the door she stopped. She turned. "The child," she said, to the property administrator, which was the closest she could come, apparently, to the right audience. "Arabella, I'd like to... I understand if it's not..." She stopped. The armor showed a crack so small most people wouldn't have seen it. "I'd like to meet her, if that's permitted." The property administrator said she'd pass the message along. Serena, when she received it, sat with it for 3 days. Then she called the mediator. She did not do this for Carmela's sake. She did it for Arabella's, who would grow up and understand what grandmothers were, and would eventually ask questions that required answers. She did it because Arabella's life was not an extension of Serena's grievances, and never would be, not if Serena had anything to do with it. She did it because her grandmother would have done it. The first meeting between Carmela and Arabella happened on a Saturday in March, in a neutral location arranged by the mediator, with Serena present and Luca not present, because that felt like the right geometry for a first meeting. Carmela sat in a chair and held Arabella with the hands of a woman who had held babies before and knew how. And Arabella looked at her with those dark filing cabinet eyes and grabbed one of Carmela's fingers in her whole fist. And Carmela's face did something that Serena had never seen it do in 7 years of being this woman's daughter-in-law. It went soft, just for a moment. Just the crack widening to something you could actually see through. Serena watched it happen from across the room and felt it move through her. Not warmth, not forgiveness, not anything she could have predicted. Just the recognition that people contained more than their worst moments, and that the worst moments didn't always win, and that the child in that woman's arms was going to have a life that none of them fully controlled, which was terrifying and correct. 8 months after the gala, Serena stood before 400 women in the Grand Hall of the Ashcroft Foundation's first annual Financial Independence Summit. The hall was on the 4th floor of a building in the financial district. Trust property. She had always liked the symmetry of using the family's infrastructure for the family's purpose. She hadn't planned to speak personally. She'd planned to give the opening remarks she and her communications team had drafted. Professional, informative, the right balance of personal history and institutional vision. She had the remarks on a card in her jacket pocket. She didn't use the card. She stood at the podium with Arabella on her left arm, 8 months old, serious and watchful, wearing a yellow dress because it was the color she seemed to respond to most, which Serena took as early evidence of taste. And she looked out at the 400 faces and said what she actually wanted to say. She told them about the trash bag. She told them about the lobby. She told them about the envelope and the 8 words and the elevator and the way the city looked from the 31st floor when you understood for the first time what you were actually standing on. She told them about her grandmother, who had spent 30 years building something in silence, and put it in an envelope and trusted that when it was needed, it would be opened, who had believed that strength discovered is different from strength given, who had been right and wrong in ways that had cost more than she'd intended and produced more than she'd planned. She told them about Veronica Hale, who had been waiting on a phone number for 9 years. She told them what the trust was and what the foundation was, and what both of them were going to do going forward, and she was precise and informative and careful with the numbers the way she was always careful with numbers. And then she stopped being informative. She looked at the room, at the 400 women, the specific texture of that many people paying attention, that much concentrated listening. And she said, "My grandmother told me that a woman doesn't become powerful when she gains wealth. I believe that. But I also think she'd have wanted me to add something she didn't put in the letter, maybe because she thought I'd figure it out myself, which I did, but it took longer than it should have." She shifted Arabella on her arm. "Power isn't the point," she said. "Power is a tool. You pick it up because you need it to build something or protect something or open something that won't open any other way. And then you use it for that. And then, if you're doing it right, you use it to make sure the next woman who needs it doesn't have to wait as long as you did." Arabella grabbed a fistful of Serena's jacket lapel and held on. "The door," Serena said. "My grandmother wrote that true power is owning the door that no one else can close. I know what she meant. I've lived what she meant. But the part she left out, the part I want you to hear, is that a door you own is only worth something if you open it." The room was very quiet. Then someone in the 3rd row started to applaud, and someone else, and then the sound moved through 400 people the way sound moves through rooms built for it, rising, filling the architectural space, bouncing off the high ceiling her grandmother's money had paid for in a building her grandmother had owned for 30 years. Arabella startled at the noise and then settled. Serena held her daughter against her chest and let the sound wash over them both, not performing anything, not managing anything, just standing in it. The applause went on for a while. When it settled, Serena looked down at Arabella, who was looking back at her with those dark ancient eyes and the expression of someone processing an enormous amount of information and reserving final judgment. "That's your great-grandmother's room," Serena said quietly, so that only Arabella could hear. "And then it was nobody's room for a while. And now it's ours." Arabella looked at the room, looked back, grabbed the lapel tighter, and held on.